Everybody.
Welcome. It's Val and Roy, and we're coming back to you from Lansing, Michigan at the Delphi Creativity Center. Sorry, we're a couple minutes late, but
We always are.
we seem like we always are, right? We try,
Yeah,
we have good
I know.
intentions, but you know how that goes.
But then last minute he says, weren't you going to get some glass? And
Yeah.
I
We
got
thought we
it.
should have
It
some
just
glass.
left it lay out there, so we got some pretty glass.
Yeah, we're talking about glass cutters, so we thought maybe we'd have some glass.
Yeah, we should cut some or show
Yeah.
how to use them.
So today we're going to talk about one of our favorite tools in the glass shop, right? So Toyo glass cutters.
And personally, the only one you and I have ever
Yeah.
used. I mean, we learned on one, I think.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Yeah, that was the first cutter. Well, I started out with a warehouse. You know, I mean, one you get for at the
the hardware store.
hardware store. Sorry, yeah, the hardware store one, the little steel ones, because I didn't know any better. And then I went into a shop, happened to be Delphi, and then someone talked me into buying this cutter here, and I thought they were just trying to make a buck.
Right. So you know what? Now that you're saying that, I have an idea.
Yeah.
What I think maybe a lot of people don't know the difference between that $2.95 glass cutter
Oh, sure.
and that, because I know in the beginning people, when they're just starting out and they look at the price on these glass cutters and whoa, you know, they're not $2.95, you know,
Yeah,
they're,
not at all.
they're quite
Yeah.
a bit more expensive, but the quality is
Oh, it's far superior,
yes,
right?
totally, light years ahead of one of those. Those dull every time you use them, don't you think? Those
Oh gosh, yeah,
they just have that
the
metal.
inexpensive, you know, when you get the hardware store.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it might work pretty good for a couple of scores, but then, you know, every time you use it, it's going to get worse and worse and worse. Whereas these are the carbide wheels.
Yeah, these are carbide wheels, which is actually one of the things about the Toyo cutters is that the cutting wheel is carbide, tungsten carbide is I think what they say. Anyway, so not just regular steel, so a lot more durable.
Right.
I mean, these cutters last. I mean, again, depending on how much you use it, and I say abuse it, right? I mean, if you're pushing like crazy and scoring too hard, obviously you're going to shorten the life of it. But man, I mean, I know at home I get like years out of one,
Oh, yeah,
right?
yeah.
Without any problems. And I mean, around here we're cutting a little bit more frequently, so but they hold up really, really quite well.
Mm-hmm. So we're basically talking about the Toyo.
Yep.
Toyo cutters. I
Yep.
don't know if you said that.
Oh,
I think you did.
I'm trying to say it a couple times. Yeah, we're talking about the Toyo cutters, which, if you're not familiar with them, it's a Japanese company, and we just found this out ourselves. But they've been around since 1907, so I think they probably know what they're doing as far as making glass cutters. And
didn't we read about the carbide? Weren't they the first?
yep, they were the first ones to use a carbide wheel for cutting, and also the first one to use self-oiling cutters. Which we will talk about as we talk about the other cutters. But so a lot of innovations from them. So again, they've been around a while. You think they probably have refined what they're doing. But so quickly, I guess we can go back to the how does this compare to the kind you buy at the hardware store, right? One thing in particular is if you look at this cutter is that the head swivels slightly. And it does that so that when you're doing curves, it's more likely to turn with you as you're doing a curve. Hopefully you also saw that little screw that was on the cutting head. The cutting heads are replaceable, so we're going to talk about cutting heads too. So when the head wears out, you don't
It's
think,
gonna be so exciting.
This is good, right?
Hang on, everybody, because we're going to talk about cutting heads pretty soon.
I can't wait. Is it so? Instead of having to buy a whole new cutter, you can just buy a replacement head, right? So that seems to make a pretty good idea.
Yeah.
And as you can see from the array here, a variety of different types of cutters, different ways of holding onto a cutter, which I think, you know, we find around here. So Val and I teach a lot of the classes here, and you know, not one cutter isn't perfect for everybody, right? Everybody, you know, has a different opinion or a different way of holding something.
And I think that too, when people talk about having a real preference for one over another handle, I think it's often what you learn with.
Oh, sure.
That's
Well,
kind of what I
definitely
refer
personal
to.
preference. Yeah.
So these are called pencil styles. And, you know, that's exactly what they look like. You know, you hold them just like, almost like you would be when you write with a pen or pencil. This one's a pistol grip.
Yep.
This one, I don't know about you, but sometimes when people have a little bit of arthritis or they have a bit of an issue with their arm, like some carpal tunnel,
Yep.
some tendonitis, if you're a tennis player,
Mm-hmm.
you know, having a bigger grip so that you don't have to squeeze your hand so tight actually does take pressure off of your arm up here. And so that's why sometimes people will go to a pistol grip. Other people just learned on a pistol grip, and that's their favorite
Because
cutter
of
no
the-
matter what, and without any issue. But that is one of the advantages to having a little bit bigger handle. It can be a little easier on your arm. So, and then these are kind of cute little
Yeah,
guys.
these are really interesting ones. They sometimes refer to them as like a saddle type cutter because you, referring to this part as kind of a saddle, and you hold on to them. Now, I can tell you there's a variety of ways holding on to these. This is probably one of the most common ways. It's in between your index finger and your thumb. And again, one of the advantages is you don't really have to grip it too hard, right? So a lot of the pressure is coming from your hand and your arm, which should make it easier to score.
Which is where it should come from, right?
Yeah, right. That's where the pressure really should come from, is more in your arm and I say shoulder area. It's really not hand, right? If you're pushing with your hand a lot with a cutter, you're gonna, get like writer's cramp. It's gonna be uncomfortable. So the advantage here again is I don't have to grip it really tight. I'm just kind of pushing and forcing it down. Now there are a variety of ways to hold this. Some people hold them like this, actually, in between their index finger and their middle finger. So really, whatever feels comfortable. That's really the nice thing about these kind of cutters. And we used to have somebody worked here. This was her favorite, right? I mean, it's all she ever used was this kind of a cutter.
And I think too, and then you can show them the other, but they all sort of have a similar. I mean, they have the same, basically the same look on the cutting head. Mm-hmm. So when you pointed out the screw, we always tell people, beginners, if you look down when you're scoring and you see your screw, then your cutter's turned the right way.
Yep.
Because it is. I'm going to turn it sideways, and you can see how there's a longer angle here, and then the shorter angle comes down this way. Well, that's like a pizza wheel in there. And if you lay it back too far when you score, that pizza wheel's basically going to be sticking out, and it's not going to make good contact. So depending on what handle situation you're using, you might have to vary the angle. So with the pistol grip, this would not be the way. I would need to come up more so that my wheel can make good clean contact, right? And that's what made me think of it when you were doing this one, because this one automatically kind of makes you be upright. But some of these others, with the pencil stuff, you lay it back too much like that, your wheel's sticking almost straight out.
Turn it sideways and do that again.
Okay, like this.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you don't want it down like this. You want it more up like this. I would always say if you have to err on one end of that angle or another, go straight up, because straight up wouldn't hang your wheel up, right?
Yeah, a lot of times you see people it comes back a little too far, and the metal part of the cutting head drags.
That corner of that.
Yeah, it's dragging on the glass, and the wheel's not really rolling. And then Val had a good point about, especially with these cutters. I mean, it's really easy to hold this cutter with the screw facing back at you. So you have to rotate it around just so again you should be able to see the screw as you were pointing out. Yeah. Oh, let me go back to the other saddle.
Sorry, I just
no, that's all right. No, that was a good idea. That was nice.
Okay. So here's another saddle type one, and one of the nice things about this one is it's customizable. So I can adjust all of these pieces to fit my hand better. So I can take out this little knurled nut here at the end, and I could flip this over like this, and now it's a different grip. Right, so I could hold it more like this, or it's even got a little spacer, so I can take the spacer out, put it there, put the spacer back on, put this on. But so there's like 4 different configurations that you can adjust this for to fit your hand,
or
right?
Or a lefty too, right? I mean, you can swivel that around and use a left-handed person.
Sure, easily. Yeah, that's the nice thing about this one is that it does rotate all the way around. It's got a little bit a wider kind of a paddle here, which I think makes it a little more comfortable to hold on to. But the same deal. So if I'm using this one, I'm going to score it, like this. And again, your fingers are really just to kind of help guide a little bit. But again, most of the pressure is coming from shoulder, arm area, not hand and wrist certainly. And same deal. Like you can hold these cutters however you want to hold them, whatever feels comfortable in your hand. I know a lot of us do it between index finger and thumb because that's how we do writing utensils, pencils or pens or whatever. We're going to talk a little bit more about the cutters. I mean, the actual type of cutting head that's on them, I think, in a minute. But
yeah,
but we want to just kind of run through. Oh, let me talk about this one then real quick, if you don't mind. And so here's another pistol grip one. But what's unique about this particular one, there's a couple things you might notice that the cutting head is bigger. For main reason why a lot of times we use this type of cutter against a straight edge. So it's a wider head, so it comes more in contact with the straight edge, and so it's just easier to track it as you're scoring straight lines. But this one is designed specifically for thicker glass. And what that has to do with is, and you won't be able to see this because it's it's too narrow. But the cutting head bevels to a point. And the difference between any of these cutters, I don't know if you can see them, you won't be able to see them, right? But the bevel is different. Here, it's actually on this one, it's like a wider bevel, if that makes any sense. Whereas on the other ones, the bevel is more, it's not as extreme as this, but it certainly is more. I think the difference is only like, 20 degrees or something. But the point is, the bevel is different on this one, so as you're scoring thicker glass, you just get a better score for that type of glass you're working on. And I've used it before. I used it just a couple seconds ago. I'm going to cut a piece of thicker glass in a minute so you guys can see what that's like. So if you work with a lot of 1/4-inch glass, it actually is really pretty good for doing that very thing. So
This came up.
that one came up. Do you want to talk about the elephant in the room or no? The oil versus. So
well,
these cutters, all of these cutters here are oil cutters.
I'll say this one's a dry wheel.
Yep, that's it.
That's
a dry
this one's
wheel.
a dry wheel. There is no chamber for oil. So, in a way, this also tells me that, it's a preference. It's a choice people make. Because I think now with the way the metals are, the carbide, and it's the oil. Using oil isn't quite what it used to be in terms of. It was also preserving the tool, preventing rust and that kind of thing. And we don't really need the oil for that anymore with the metals today. But we don't use oil just because we don't need to, basically. And it creates a little extra work, So especially with our fusing, we really do have to clean that oil off of the glass. It'll leave a residue, and that could cause problems in a firing schedule and some issues that we don't want to deal with. So, and then if you're doing copper foil, like a stained glass piece that has copper foil, that has an adhesive back to it, you're going to wrap all your pieces in that adhesive back tape, and if you've used oil and you haven't really cleaned it off, that tape isn't going to stick. So it's like an extra process.
Yep.
So if we grind, if I'm doing a stained glass project with copper foil, I may have to grind my piece, it gets wet, I just wipe it off, and then I can foil it. I don't have to go to the extra step of maybe using some kind of, degreaser or something. So it's just personal preference. We know people who still use oil. We are not here to say it's wrong or bad. It's just not our preference.
That's something we use. Yep.
Yeah.
So we use, and I can tell you, we use all of these cutters here at Delphi. All that you see on the table, we just run these dry, is what we say. So we just don't put any oil in these kind of cutters. So again, if you're not familiar with it, this is hollow. You can take this off. I mean, we sell oil. Delphi sells a couple of different cutting oils. The oil goes in here. My advice to you might be, don't fill the entire chamber with oil. Just put a little bit in, just so it's covering up down in here. And then again, same thing with these. I mean, all these little back end, these nuts come off. The handles or the barrels here are hollow for putting oil in them. Yeah. You can notice on that one. This one is also, even these small ones, this unscrews. There's a spot to put oil there and screw it back on. This one's, oops, I can't get that one back on. And this one's same deal, right? This little knurled nut here on the end unscrews. And, sorry, I'm getting that. All I was doing is grabbing the spacer. And you can see you can put oil in there if you so choose. And same deal with this one, right? I'm not gonna take it off, but you get the same idea, right? That comes off. That whole thing is hollow. You could put oil in there. Again, what was unique that Toyo did in the cutting world is that they call these self-oiling, because it does. The oil just will come out, through the cutting head. So that is the difference between cutting heads, right? And so if you have any of these cutters that require oil, or a place where you could put oil, you have to buy a cutting head, a replacement head that is for an oil cutter. So on the table here, we have a couple sitting. Like this one is just for the dry wheel cutter. And I can tell you, it only fits this one.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, we tried.
We did a little bit of experimenting.
beforehand, and you can't swap them around. Well,
Yeah.
You cannot put the dry wheel one on any of the oil ones.
Right.
It won't fit because the shafts are different. So this is the oil one. You can put the oil one on the dry wheel, but it doesn't fit and it'll be really loose. I tried it yesterday.
We couldn't tighten it down.
Yeah, you
enough.
couldn't tighten it down enough. So you do have to buy whatever is specific to that cutter.
To whatever cutter you have.
Now, the other thing you can do is, this is an oil cutter, but you'll notice it's a wide one, and this fits any of the oil cutters. So you could put it on any one of these if you're doing, again, a lot of straight line work and working against a ruler or against a straight edge of some sort. It does really track against those pretty well. Again, that cutter head would fit on any of these without any problem.
Okay.
Yeah, that was all right. So you want to talk about the tap cutters then?
Yeah.
Before we do that, real quick, we've got a question. How about using oil for cutting circles? How do you use it on glass for that? So same deal.
We don't.
Yeah, so I mean, I can tell you again, Val and I don't use any oil in any of our cutters, but what some people do is, again, let's use this one as an example. So there's not a place to put oil in this cutter. So what people will often do is they'll have like a little container, maybe have a cotton ball in there and put some cutting oil on it, and they'll have this sitting and resting on that. And so when they pick it up, it's going to have a little oil on it because it's on the cotton ball. I know people that use circle cutters, because a lot of times the circle cutters don't have a chamber to put oil in, and they do something very similar. I know sometimes people will use a rag and have some cutting oil on it and just wipe it on the head. I know some people dip it right just straight in the oil and use it that way. So if that's your preference, I mean, there's a variety of ways of getting oil onto the
And I, like I said, we're not trying to tell anybody they shouldn't be using it by any means.
Yeah.
But we also, Roy and I both also are fairly successful with our cutting skills. And so, I mean, to a point. So I don't know. Sometimes I don't feel like there's any advantage to using it. For us, we feel like there's only a disadvantage just because it requires us to do extra work.
Yeah.
So that's just it. So I mean, but any cuts we do, we never.
Yeah, I know.
I mean, we don't have a little container with a little cotton ball. We have no oil anywhere near us when we cut. So
I know it's kind of controversial.
it is. I mean, a little bit. Like I said, one of our really good friends that's worked here forever really believes in using the oil, and that's great. That's
a lot of our customers. I've had a few of them try to talk me into it. So
right.
But whatever you do, it works. Right? You just gotta get comfortable, I guess, with whatever method
Practice.
you're using. Right? I mean, if you have a cutter and you're struggling, then you could try it with oil. Right? Maybe that makes a difference for you. If you have it and you're tired of all the oil everywhere, you can run it without the oil and see if that works for you. It kind of goes back to this again being. That's one reason why there's so many different handles and things is just because it needs to be comfortable for you and what you're doing, because that's when you're going to do your best glass cutting, is when you're familiar with the tool, you're comfortable with it, it fits in your hand, all those nice things. So, I mean, one of the advantages that Val and I have here is when customers come in, we can just let them try, all these different cutters and then say, hey, try this one, which one feels good, and then they have the opportunity to purchase or not, right? So.
Yeah.
I know it's a little trickier when you're not close by and you have to buy one, but buy them all. That's what I would say. Right? I mean, might as well. I mean, I can tell you that, not even joking around, I've got like four cutters in my studio because I can never find them. So, so I have them sitting all over the place. So I'll eventually stumble into one. And I started buying these, trying to get the colored ones just because they show up better for me, anyways. But
and they're very pretty colors.
Yeah.
I love it. I try to get a variety of colors.
Thanks. That was nice. I know. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
But
so this is.
I also
This is the one he and I both like.
So here's another one. This is a brass one that Toyo makes, and one of the nice things I've always sort of enjoyed about it is the weight of it. Right. It's just got a little weight to it that just feels like a nice tool kind of in your hand. This one is their original Toyo did when they did the self-oiling cutter. So this is like from 1975 or 76 or something. They developed this one. It is pretty straight barrel here. I mean, I tell you, one of the nice things is it is brass, and if you drop it, like, you're not going to break it. Which again, for me, I know back at my studio, it's I'm knocking these things on the floor all the time. So it's kind of nice to have in that regard.
Okay, and before we go any further, we've got 2 more questions popping up. So Sharon wants to know, do you ever have trouble with rusting of the cutter head over time when not using oil?
Yeah, that's a great question because
Because that's Lynn's follow-up. She goes, I thought using oil preserved the blade.
yeah,
Yes,
a lot of
it
people
used
say
to.
that.
I mean, that truly
Yeah,
was, you know,
That's
totally accurate before, right? Before
Yeah.
the metals became what they are. But
well, I can tell you, my studio at home is in my basement. So we're in Michigan, and if you're not familiar, we have we have basements, right? And they tend to be a little on the damp side. I don't know. We're surrounded by the Great Lakes, so it gets kind of moist and humid around here. And so mine are in the basement, and I mean I have them for years, and I personally have never seen a speck of rust on
Same.
any of them.
I've
Right?
never-
Have you ever
Same.
seen rust on them?
never.
Mine's in a box and it's fine.
Yeah, even then, right? I mean, if you're concerned about it, like I said, just wipe some oil on the head as you're storing it. But I don't know if it's
It's not necessary anymore.
it's I personally, as Val has said, the issues with using oil for us, anyways, has not really given us a good reason to continue to use it or use it. But anyways, but thanks for the questions, and feel free to ask us because we'll give you our honest opinion, right? I mean, that's one of the things that Val and I definitely do is we almost everything we talk about are things we've used, and we have a pretty good experience with them. I've been using these cutters for I don't know how long, 27
I've been
years,
using
30
as long
years,
as I've been doing
whatever.
it.
So it's a
30,
really
yeah.
long time. So I mean, not this exact cutter. But, what else? Oh, I gotta talk about one more thing about the cutter. So there's something that you can't really tell by looking at them, but they have slightly different heads, and what they really have is a slightly different cutting wheel. Is what they have. So Toyo a few years ago, I'm not sure exactly when, came out with this what they call a tap cutting head, tap technology. I think is how they refer to it. Yeah, and so I think Keely's got a picture. This is what the cutting wheel looks like. So the axle goes through the hole in the middle, right? And you can see this really kind of interesting sort of shape here. They refer to it as a cam, this design. And so as the wheel rolls on the shaft, you can see it's not going to roll smoothly because of these indentations, right? These cams that are in there. And so the wheel actually is kind of moving and vibrating slightly, right? I think that's why they
Use the
call
V.
it a vibrating thing, yeah.
I think
And so it
that's
vibrates
probably-
slightly. And so what you get is more of like a really, you get it like a dash sort of scoring line. And they found that they think that cuts better, that it breaks better. I mean, to be honest, I'm not sure I know it's a huge difference between them, but there definitely is, a difference between them, right?
This one is.
Yeah, so let me show you the ones that have taps. So if you're buying this pistol
Oh, it
grip,
says he
yeah,
has
this one
a
is so
sticker.
nice that they put the sticker right on there. It tells you it's a tap technology, right? So that will do it. I know you probably can't see this very well, maybe you can, but there's a small little V right here on the cutting head, and that V for them stands for vibrating, which is what they mean by their tap controller. It is same. I don't know if you can see this one or not, Keely, but again, at the end of the number, that's
Yeah,
the
there's
numbers
a
from them.
item
I know
number,
they're small and it's kind of tiny. It's hard to see, but that's also a tap one. Oh, this is a tap one. If you get this glass cutter for the thick glass, you can see it says, there's a V in there somewhere after the number, right? So that's how you know. I mean, if you're not sure, if you have a cutter at home, you want to take a look at it. Currently, those three models, if you purchase them from us, they come already with the tap wheel on them. We sell replacement. Just recently, we're selling a replacement head for just the tap cutter. Now, the other thing too is you could buy the tap cutter and put it on any of the oil cutters. So you can put them on any of these that don't come with a tap. So if you'd rather prefer that one, you certainly could get one. That's the nice thing again about Toyo. As long as it's one that's supposed to be for oil, I mean, you can swap any of these heads around, right? You can go with a wide head, a narrow head, tap wheel, not a tap wheel.
It's just the dry wheel.
Dry wheel is
more
just got to be by itself. Yeah, dry. That's it. That's all we got.
Okay, I think now is the time to show cutting, because the other question is, would you say it's true that inconsistent pressure on the cutting head is the most common reason for less successful breaks?
Yeah, that's great. I think that's probably
I
totally
do
it.
think that's
I say that all the time, right? And that's the challenge, right, for all of us, is to always be consistent along the length of that score with the pressure, and that's hard to do. I mean, it's
It is
easy
hard
to
to
say, especially if you're doing a curve or you're doing something else, right?
So we'll
It's
even
just
say,
tricky.
that if you start out, because we also talk about not scoring too heavily,
Yes.
that's, I think,
Yep.
scoring hard enough to create little chips along your score line is definitely too hard. So I think one of the tricky things is once you're in the beginning and you're starting your score line and you realize you're gouging a little bit, then I think people tend to go, ooh, I let up and not. I think no matter what you start at, you got to finish. You know, I think you get into more trouble trying to adjust that pressure as you go. You don't think so? Not necessarily?
No, I see what you're. I totally agree with what you're saying. I mean, I think that. I mean,
did I say it backwards?
No. I think that the goal is to get a really even pressure, but yes. I do think sometimes people adjust it as they're going, right? So,
I do think that, yeah. And sometimes, depending on how much you adjust it, it kind of be the downfall of the situation.
Yeah.
I just think it's always really good to note it. You know, look at it after you've scored, and if you really can see it looks kind of gouged, then just know, ooh, I got to lighten up next time.
Yeah, you know, and every glass is a little different too, which we're not going to get into a lot of cutting. I think we've done some cutting videos before. I mean, we're not going to get into a lot of, you know, difference between brands of glass and how you might score them or not score them, but there is a difference, right? I mean, so you can't just, you know, have one score that you do for every piece of glass you come across. You have to adjust what you're doing based on the type of glass, whether it's hand rolled, machine rolled, all those things are really
color. Is it
even
clear?
Color,
Is it transparent?
Yeah, that makes a difference. Opaque, right?
White,
There's a big difference,
yeah.
or can be a big difference. And I know there's a couple things that Val and I both definitely agree on when it comes to, which is hard to believe, right? That we agree on some stuff. But one is that a really light score is better, and the other is we're not a big fan of having people listen for their scores. Would you agree to that?
Yeah.
Right, because it's misleading. It's extremely misleading.
It's definitely going to be there. That tick is definitely going to be there on a clear or a transparent color. But when you start getting into some of the more art glass, multicolored things, especially a white, something with white in it, you may not hear that
score. Might hear any sound.
And because the glass is a little harder and it doesn't tick. And then what happens is, if people rely on that, then they push harder because they are not hearing that tick. When the reality is if I'm cutting a square of white, I may not hear it tick at all, but it breaks out just fine. You know, it's so that like you said, there's some nuances you kind of have to sort of try to navigate around because it's not all the same. But I always think looking at your score after you've done it is the way to really tell. If it looks the same from start to finish and you have a little bit of a trouble finding it, then I would say that's a good score.
Let's do it.
I was just gonna say, want to do a couple scores? Well, I'm gonna do a couple scores, and one of the things I want to do also is just show you how you grab and hold the cutters, right? So I'm gonna grab the very first one we have. This is a dry wheel cutter, right? So it's designed to be held up here, up on this, you know, dark brown or black, whatever that is. I hold them. I always hold them down here. I don't know why. I just feel like I have more control, but it is certainly a matter of opinion, right?
I guess, yeah.
I always put my fingers on the brass part. So I'm just going to come in. So for those of you that are maybe new to glass cutting, we always score from one end to another edge.
You want your safety glasses.
You want to get pretty close, and I do have some safety glasses.
I'm impressed. I'm really impressed.
I remembered them, right? So we're going to go from one edge to the other edge. And that means just getting close, right? You don't have to spend 5 minutes trying to get right on the edge of the glass, right? Get close. And then we're going to come through. And so again, cathedral glasses, you're probably going to hear a little sound with them, right? The more transparent it is, so you can see that score and how well you can sort of, I'll let you take it because you can see it. So
there.
It's a little light.
Maybe I should get a piece of white.
I'm a good one. Yeah, if you want to do that, that'd be good. It's a little hard at the beginning, right? For me, I think it is. It looks a little whiter, you might notice, than it does where I finished up. That's probably the better part of the score. Again, but this should break without any problem. Let me just grab a pair of running pliers. I'll just show you how that goes, right? So we're going to come in here. Oh, let me show you a bad score next to it. Actually, let me do that, right? So just so you guys know what Val and I are talking about when we say people sometimes score too hard. That's too hard. And you should be able to easily see that score, right? If your score looks like a string instead of a hair, right, then that's too hard. If you looked at it closely, which you might not be able to see, I'm going to give it back to Kaylee. There's little bits of glass that are popping up on that score line. You can see this little like glass dust from there. And that is, again, what's really happening is we're getting these little breaks, these little fissures coming like this off the score line. And glass is a simple material. It breaks wherever it's weakest. And if one of those little fissures hits a weak spot, that's where it's going. So, and I know that I've created all those fissures because all this glass that's just kind of popping up
You
on
can
the surface.
actually
Yeah,
see
you
it on your
feel
finger,
it, right?
and I can see it
get
sparkle.
Yeah, you
on
get
your
Oh,
a
yeah.
little thing on your finger, right?
Yeah.
So I'm going to use running pliers. If you're not familiar with these, right? I just go to the middle of the plier, squeeze it. Now this glass here is machine made, so it tends to be pretty forgiving. So this one's probably going to break without any problem. But imagine a hand rolled glass that's maybe 2 or 3 colors mixed in there, full of stress, right? So an even light score is really what that's looking for. So that was the dry wheel. I think the oil ones are going to be, any of these oil ones are going to be exactly the same what I just did, right? The pencil style ones, right? So again, if you were noticing it, I wasn't letting it fall back in my hand, right? I was picking it up a little bit more so that, as Val said, it doesn't have to be straight up and down, but it can be back on your hand, right? So somewhere in between that feels comfortable is what I'm trying to do. And then come in and score this one. Put a little curve on the end just for the
I get a question.
Yeah, this is a better score for me. You can see it's really
Barely.
nice, really nice and light, right? So that's the way it should be.
There it is.
And then I'm going to come in here, squeeze that one, right? You can see how. Oh, good. We're
So I get the
challenging.
question a lot
Oh, yeah.
about, do you draw towards you or do
Oh,
you
good
roll
point.
away
Yeah,
from
yeah,
you?
yeah.
And the answer to that is whichever you want to do. So I put a line here, and I sometimes my go-to is going to be starting down here when I'm following a pattern line, because if I start up here, then my hand is over where my pattern line is and I can't see it. So it's as simple as that. But this wheel does work both ways.
Yeah, either direction.
Either
That's
direction.
true.
Because sometimes when we cut big sheets, I think, and I don't even know why, but I think
I pull towards.
I'm just making sure I can reach, I think. And then I usually just pull towards me. But when I'm doing smaller things, or especially having to follow a line, I'm always going to start at the bottom of it and go out away from me.
That's a good point.
Thank you.
Good. Let me show you the pistol grip then real quick. So I know Val was holding on to it earlier.
You do hold it just like here, like in the palm of your hand. I saw you holding it kind of back here or something, didn't you? No? I hold it like all the way up there, but it doesn't make a difference. I guess. Whatever.
I don't,
Whatever.
until we're talking about it,
I know,
I
you
don't
don't
think
really
it
think twice about what
comes
you're
into
doing.
my head where I
And
just
again,
do it.
Nice thing is you don't have to grip the heck out of it, right? You just have to hold on to it. We're going to come in here. I'm going to score something else. I'm going to try to make a skinny little score here. Now, this one was, this is the tap wheel. So it might have sounded a little louder than when I was using, this other cutter just a few seconds ago. And it's because of the tap wheel. Again, the tap is, if you remember what it looked like on the inside, the cams on the inside, right? And the wheel is vibrating as it rolls across. And so sometimes they say it sounds like a zip kind of a noise. I don't know if it was that loud. I didn't really notice it, but
It was
anyways.
maybe a little louder.
So I'm gonna come in with the running pliers, right? Break that one. That's that. Oh, let me show you these other ones real quick. So again, this is what's called a Thomas grip. I guess I didn't really tell you what the real name of it is. Thomas grip. Again, I'm gonna hold it here because that's how I like to hold it.
Apparently that's
And
how
then-
Thomas holds it. Is that right?
Whoever Thomas is.
Yeah, whoever.
I think it was Thomas Jefferson used this one
Oh,
right before he signed the Declaration of Independence.
nice.
And then
A little bit of history lesson here.
Thank you very much. That's the Thomas grip one, and then this one is I don't what they call this
I got your, when you
comfort grip. Is
That's
that it?
it. No,
Yeah.
the comfort grip is this one. I
Oh,
thought.
dang
Custom grip.
it. Oh, the custom grip. That's even better.
Because you can customize
That's
it.
Good point, right?
See,
There you
now
go.
we would have
Nice.
remembered had we associated
I
that.
know. So then I'm going to come in and this is a little tall. It's a little tall for me, but I'm not going to. That's all right. I'm not going to adjust it because
You could customize it later.
I'll customize it later. Right. So I'm going to come in here. I don't know what I'm doing. This is a tap one, and I know you guys can't tell, but I can feel it as I'm scoring it. It does actually have that little bit of a vibration to it. It's slightly different than the other cutter I just used, right? And then I'm gonna come in here.
And here's another. I don't mean to turn this into a cutting class. I don't mean to necessarily, but when I watch you and I notice things, I think that it's also something that we talk about in a beginning class or people comment on, and it's you and I both score fairly slowly.
Yeah.
And I think that is one of the things too that gets people in trouble. They feel like they've got to, you know, like
Okay,
that.
yeah,
And it's hard to stay constant with your pressure when you do that. So it is. I don't do many things very slowly, do I? But I do score pretty slowly, you know, just because I feel like I have more control over my pressure, and you know, and then I don't have to redo it. That's usually my motivation.
I've noticed when people go faster, they go harder with their score. You see that a lot of times.
And they kind of let up at the end a little bit, maybe sometimes too. So I don't know. That's just a.
So I was going to show this one too. As I mentioned earlier, this is for cutting thicker glass. So I have this.
Let's show it side by side with maybe put a piece of that on top of it.
Oh yeah, like in comparison, or like this. So you can kind of see the difference in thickness. I'll let you grab
There we go.
Right, so it's twice as thick, right? So if you're not familiar, standard art glass is an 1/8 of an inch thick, or 3 millimeter. That's what they're aiming for, right? And then this one, there's a couple of manufacturers that make a 1/4 inch or 6 millimeter glass, and again, that's what this is. And so cutting this sometimes can be a little tricky. I just talked to somebody out there that works there. That she's like, I don't like cutting that just because it's thick, right? I mean, it's unpredictable. So I'm just going to come in. Again, this is has the wide head on it, so it tracks up against the straight edge. This is a glass square, if you're not familiar with this tool, which is really pretty nice. Has a little lip on it that catches the edge of the glass, so I can get a nice right angle, and then come in here and score this. Sorry, I'm trying to get on the end.
Very quiet.
Oh, that was super quiet.
Let's see that. Can you see it?
Oh yeah, is that a nice score, right?
Oh, it's like so hard to see.
I can't see it.
I can see it from where I am.
Can anybody see that score? Anybody?
Right there.
Anybody?
Anybody?
Right
Okay,
there.
I get to see it. Let me see. Oh, I see it. Yeah.
Right? Or nice. Am I on it?
No, you gotta move to the right. Yeah.
I can't
There
see
you
it.
go.
All right. Anyways, there it is. And
Yes.
Beautiful.
look at that, it's right on my score that I can barely see. Again, goes to show you how light of a score I have, right? I tend to have a really light score, but really nice break, right? For the most part. Now, again, if you're not familiar with running players in general, but they do this a lot of times. So this little flare that's here at the end is pretty standard for when you're working with running players, and especially on thicker glass, you'll see that. Where you don't see it often, if you're snapping it on a table like we do, you don't see it, but running players will always do it. Yeah, and there's a curve that I did earlier, so I can. I'll
You
do
know what? I
another.
always use this.
Oh yeah,
Just
to
there's a
kinda-
little bit of a flare. I mean, that's a little bit too
Yeah,
thick.
that's a big
But
chunky
sometimes
one,
you'll
but-
see some real thin ones, and then because this is the metal and it's got the texture, I'll just.
Just kind of use it as a.
Nice.
So I'm just gonna do a simple curve here, just for the fun of it, just so you guys can see what that's like. Ooh, I got it. And this one I did, you can see a little bit harder. Maybe you can see that score better than what I did last time, or a little harder. Anyways, and then come in here and squeeze it. And you can see that breaks right on that curve. And again, that one is, a little bit of a flare again down here on the end from where the running players are at. Yeah, and then, you could use one little trick, right, to use this almost like a file kind of. Is that what you do?
Yeah, just to kind of knock it off.
Just to knock it off so you don't poke yourself.
Because
is all you
that's
really
like,
need to do, right?
razor sharp.
Yeah, oh, it's super sharp.
Get it
So,
off.
but that's the nice for cutting thick glass one. All these other nice Toyo cutters.
Yep.
I don't know what else we.
I don't know. I mean, we do sell other cutters too. I mean, there's all kinds
Sure
of
we do.
other
Yep.
cutters,
We
just
do.
so you know. But like I said, this happens to be one that was around back when we were around.
Yeah, and then this again, what's something that Val and I are familiar with, and I think we influenced what we have in the classrooms a little bit. So these are these cutters are the ones that we have in our classrooms. We just find, especially for beginners, people that don't have a lot of experience, they can usually be pretty successful with when using a Toyo.
Yeah.
But,
Well, we've gotten great response. People seem to think this is very helpful.
Oh, great,
Oh,
great.
good.
If you guys have questions later on, I mean, you can
I was
always
afraid
reach
it
out to
wasn't
us,
going to
right?
be very exciting.
Yeah, we were gonna.
But
You make everything exciting.
Oh,
well,
we're just.
good. I'm glad.
No, we love talking about. I mean, personally, I love talking about cutters, right? I mean, that's.
Yeah,
it's a
and
great thing.
we like talking about things that we use and
Yes,
that we do
yeah.
truly have a
Yeah.
experience.
And
with, so.
and I know Kaylee said something about it earlier. That it's probably one of the most important tools in your studio, right? I mean, no matter if you're stained glass, mosaic, or fuser,
you're going to use this tool all the time, right? I mean, this is what's going to be most successful for getting shapes and getting your design that you're trying to get. So.
Okay, before we wrap up, Carol is asking, stand up or sit down while cutting?
Well,
Oh, I thought Carol was telling me to stand up.
I tell her to stand all the time. No.
Once again, I think it's personal preference again, but I do think standing up is, I am more successful when I stand up.
I feel like you have more control.
Yeah.
Because it isn't, and people think it's just this arm thing, and it's really not. It's more of a, a whole movement with your, and so I think that it actually, you don't get as jammed up if you're standing up as you could sitting down. That's just
I know that. Well, like when we teach classes, we ask people to stand. I mean, if they're able to when they're cutting, because of that very reason, right? Because it's when you sit, you have a tendency to want to use your hand and wrist more as applying the force. I mean, I know lots of people that cut sitting, but they didn't start out that way, right? They learned to cut standing, and then found it that what they were doing, they could do it sitting. But I stand all the time when I cut.
Yeah, me too.
Part of it is even when, like Val was saying, like if I'm doing curves, I can just turn. It's pretty easy to turn your body when you're standing. Sometimes when you're sitting, like you said, it's not always the most fluid way of trying to get out and around. So, but good question, Carol.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Thanks for asking.
Yeah.
If you guys have other questions, you can always email us at facebook@delphiglass.com. You can send us a message on Instagram,
Facebook,
Facebook,
YouTube,
Hey, YouTube. Yeah, we're on YouTube.
all of the things.
All of them.
YouTube's one I can remember.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's good. Well,
Okay.
yeah, thanks for joining us
And,
today.
and suggestions.
we'll be back in
if
a couple
you
weeks
have,
and-
if you have any suggestions or like a specific tool, I mean, if
Or
that-
just want a demo of a tool even.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. But the other thing I wanted to say real quick, because we're in the middle of November, so I mean these things make great stocking stuffers, right? I mean any of these easily fit into them.
Yeah.
And who wouldn't love to get one of those, right? Or like I said, you can never have too many glass cutters. That's for sure. So, well, thanks. We'll see you guys in a couple weeks.
Yep.